Nothing But the Truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa from India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues of concern and bring you clarity and perspective as to why these matter to you and the one clear truth that emerges from it. Many of you may recall the Hindi movie Mr Natwarlal that starred with Amitabh Bachchan as the lead. It was released way back in 1979. And the movie was based on the life of Mr Natwarlal, who actually existed and was facing charges in an incredible amount of cases, 100 in all, and was serving term in jail for 113 years. Now, Mr Natwarlal was the ultimate confidence trickster. And when I met him, where he was lodged in the Varanasi jail, his image took me by surprise. Far from the dashing hero that Amitabh Bachchan portrayed, here was an old man with a paunch and a potbelly that stood out. But the jailers and the others that I spoke to told me not to get deceived by his looks, and as I kept conversing with him, he said, there could have been many thieves who could have conned people, but there's only one Mr. Natwarlal, and that's me. Now, what's interesting about the way Mr. Natwarlal operated was that he was a tremendous impersonator. One of Natwarlal's most famous cons was when he posed as the assistant, the then Union Finance Minister, N.D. Tiwari, and approached a watch shop in Connaught Place in Delhi. And he told the proprietor that the Congress party was wanting to gift their key members watches, expensive watches, and wanted 93 of them, and he would pay him the money. The proprietor believed him and said, okay, fine, but he needed the money, and Natwarlal then took him, or his assistant, to North Block, which is the headquarters of the Finance Ministry, entered that, asked him to wait in the car, came back with a draft of 32,000 rupees, and that time 32,000 was quite a princely sum, unlike now, and took the watches from him, all the 93 watches, and disappeared. When the proprietor took the draft that Natwarlal had presented him and took it to his bank, 2 days later the bank reported that it was a forged document and they would not be able to give him the money. By then, Natwarlal had disappeared. Now, Natwarlal also made 8 daring escapes from jails that he was sentenced to. And one of them is considered one of the biggest jailbreaks that happened, where he used a clever tactic of having one of the jailers, by bribing them, giving him a sub-inspector's suit, and then he wore that suit, got himself out of the cell that was there, and walked out. And as he walked out, the guards thought he was a police officer who was outside, and they saluted him. And he got into a car and drove away. Natwarlal had the last laugh when the money that he gave the jailers for this escape, which he claimed was a lot of money, when they opened that attaché case, it was full of old newspapers. Now, why am I narrating the story of Natwarlal? It's because today we have a much younger Natwarlal that has emerged, a modern day one, and who could probably emulate him in the tricks that he has done. His name is Sukash Chandrashekhar, and he, in the last 15 years, is estimated to have swindled people through impersonation of more than rupees 500 crores. He has over 30 cases against him, and he's wanted in 6 states, including Delhi, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. Now, apart from the fact that he has made this kind of loot, he also lived life king style and is supposed to have had a penchant for both watches and cars. When he was arrested, the investigators found in his possession over 54 cars, and that included a Rolls-Royce and a Ferrari, and combined these were worth close to rupees 35 crores. He also had in his possession around 80 watches that totaled rupees 18 crore. And even more, as the police officials and the enforcement directorate also got into the act, they found that he had a curious penchant, which was to shower gifts on Bollywood movie stars. And among them is Jacqueline Fernandez, a Bollywood actress, who he paid allegedly close to rupees 7 crores in a span of 5 months in 2021. And these were all in the form of various gifts. In the charge sheet was also mentioned the other movie stars he's supposed to have approached. These included Bhumi Pednekar, Nora Fatehi, Sara Ali Khan, and even Janhvi Kapoor. Although all these women did not get into the inducements that he had offered them. But Sukash Chandrashekhar really shot into fame for one single heist, which was when he duped the wife of a well-known industrialist who had been jailed of close to rupees 200 crores, promising that he could get the government to let that industrialist out of jail. But before we get into the details of that case, let's look at who Sukash Chandrashekhar really is. He was brought up in Bangalore, a city that I grew up in. His family and his parents were of modest means. His father was partly an auto mechanic, apart from other odd jobs that he did. His mother was a homemaker. But the parents ensured that Sukash went to an upscale school called the Baldwin's High School, though apparently he dropped out before finishing his 10th standard. Now this school dropout then began to show his true colors. According to police officials, among the first cases that happened was even before he was eligible to drive a car or ride a scooter, he apparently started doing so by forging a letter from the police commissioner's office that said that he was entitled to drive these anywhere across the state. Now, one does not know how true this is, but the fact is that at a very early age, he began his whole profession of impersonation. He had a very good command of the language. He apparently, when he was interviewed in Delhi, could speak at least 4 or 5 languages fluently, particularly English, Hindi, and a couple of South Indian languages. He also had, those who interrogated him said that right from the beginning he was a whiz kid and was a smooth talker who could, in many senses, reassure you of his credentials and was a great persuader. Now, these are qualities that most conmen, particularly Mr Natwarlal, also had, and he put that to good use, starting small. Most of his heists in the early days was not large sums of money. He even did work for 50,000 rupees. He was duping people. But Sukash got more and more ambitious. Among the bigger ones that he did when he was young was that he posed as a government officer who could solve the problems of a particular builder who had issues with a plot of land that he bought. He took from that builder rupees 1.7 crores, promising that he would get all the clearances, and then disappeared. But after committing a series of cons in Bangalore, things get too hot for Sukash and he goes to Chennai. It was in Chennai that Sukash meets his future wife, Leena Maria Paul. At that time, she was a part-time Malayali actress, and he, to impress her, posed as the grandson of the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu. He came in a car with a red beacon and an assistant and gave her the works. So impressed was she with him that they fell in love, and subsequently, though she knew that he was a petty con man, they stayed together. And they joined hands, apparently, allegedly, to carry out various other cons subsequently. Their first big joint con, allegedly, was in 2013 when they duped a Chennai businessman and his wife of rupees 13 crores. And they did it smartly. They posed as government contractors, and since the Chennai businessman was manufacturing sanitary napkins, vending machines for sanitary napkins, they said that the government needed a huge amount of these, close to 30,000 of them, and would the Chennai businessman bid for them? And the way they did it was that they posed as an IAS officer. Sukash posed as an IAS officer of Karnataka, which really wanted to buy these, and called this couple from that number. When they checked and wanted to find out, Leena Paul Maria picked up the number and confirmed. Convinced by the fact that Sukash was an IAS officer based on this call, the business couple went ahead and said that they would be interested in tendering the entire contract. But Sukash said that before that, the contract was worth close to 132 crores. But Sukash said that they would have to give rupees 19 crores in bribe. So the couple then went to a bank, withdrew the money in the belief that this was going to happen, and handed it over to Sukash. But after paying the 19 crore rupees, when they went back to the government department, they found that this was a huge impersonation and Sukash was nowhere to be seen. The government denied that they had any links with him and the couple lost the money. Sukash got even bolder. This time, he attempted to dupe a big politician, that was TTV Dinakaran, who was a rebel leader in the AIDMK close to Jayalalitha and Sashikala, and there was a battle between the two groups, and TTV Dinakaran was interested in keeping the symbol, the AIDMK symbol, for the party, and Sukash posed as someone with high connections in the Election Commission of India that could ensure that this symbol would be granted to TTV Dinakaran. Of course, Dinakaran denies that there was any such episode, but Sukash is said to have demanded close to rupees 50 crores for this particular thing. This is what got him the attention of both the ED as well as the police, and in fact, Sukash was arrested for this particular case based on a complaint and was lodged in the Tihar jail initially. This is when he begins to commit his biggest heist ever. It was in Tihar jail that Sukash got to know that Shivinder Mohan Singh, the former co-promoter of Ranbaxy Group and also of Religare Finances, was in jail for various charges that included misappropriation of funds, among other things, and also for money laundering. This was charged by the ED, and Sukash began to study the entire case. He apparently bribed officials in the jail to get all the details about Shivinder and his case, and also his associates outside to track the movements of his wife, Aditi Singh, and their children, and he put together a comprehensive sting operation. What he did was that, knowing that the family was desperate to get Shivinder out of jail, he called up his wife, Aditi Singh, posing, of all things, as the Union Law Secretary and subsequently even as the Union Home Secretary, and told her that the government was keen on getting Shivinder out of jail and put him on bail because they wanted him on a major committee to handle COVID. Now remember, this is 2021, where COVID was raging, and because Shivinder and his brother Malvinder were involved in pharmaceuticals, this was a plausible explanation. Now Sukash cleverly uses a spoofing app which doesn't reveal the number that he's calling in, but actually shows up as a number that is in the Union Home Ministry and the Law Ministry. So when Aditi Singh calls these numbers, there's actually officials from those places that answer these calls. Having convinced her that the calls that he made are from the correct departments, Sukash then poses as an undersecretary to the senior officer and informs her that the Prime Minister's office is willing to help them out, but the only thing that they have to do is that they would have to deposit certain sums of money in the party funds, the ruling party funds. Now this seems plausible, so Aditi Singh begins to collect money for it, and the first tranche of money of rupees 20 crores is paid, one through a conduit in Hong Kong and almost 19 crores in cash to a particular person that Sukash identifies, which Aditi Singh then hands over the money to it. But doesn't stop there. Every day and every week, Sukash begins to call her and says that things are difficult to get done, they need more money, that the people behind the entire release or that want to release her husband are demanding more money, and Aditi Singh, driven to desperation, begins to collect money, all that she has. She sells her jewelry, she borrows from her family, and as things go, even when she is not able to meet, he begins to threaten her. She gets worried. She doesn't even tell her husband what is happening because he threatens both her husband and her children and says that any such information that is there, and he seems particularly aware of all their movements, and this is what causes her concern. She does not inform anyone and goes ahead and pays close to 200 crores in 40 transactions that she did. Meanwhile, it was the Enforcement Directorate that was keeping a watch on the activities of Shivinder Mohan Singh and his family that notices these unusual transactions and confronts Aditi Singh. When she confesses it, they then investigate it, and to their surprise, they find it is being done by Sukash Chandrashekhar sitting in Rohini jail. He had been transferred from the Tihar jail that was there, and he had done this elaborate operation through it, and they told Aditi Singh about the fraud that had been committed on her by Sukash Chandrashekhar. And then as the ED began to probe, more and more skeletons began to tumble out. Sukash Chandrashekhar, as mentioned earlier, had this huge penchant for showering gifts on Bollywood actresses, and the connections with Jacqueline Fernandez began to come out. Apparently, Sukash Chandrashekhar showered her with so many gifts that it totaled 7 crore rupees, apart from giving her expensive bags, really luxury bags and purses that were there. There were cars gifted to some of her family members. A lot of cash transactions were happening during that particular period. Though these are all in the realm of a charge sheet, while Jacqueline Fernandez denies all these involvement with Sukash Chandrashekhar and says that of course she met him, but these were under different circumstances. He seemed depressed, and Sukash, interestingly, actually gets bail from jail to attend his father's funeral, and then gets it extended, and he meets her in Chennai on a couple of occasions. Though she maintains that these were all because of friendship, the enforcement director believes that she is connected with the crime and has also charge sheeted her. Of course, all these must lead to prosecution, and that's the difficulty the enforcement directorate and the police officers would face, because so far Sukash Chandrashekhar has not been convicted in any of the 30 cases that he has been charged with. He also maintains that he is not a fraudster, that he is a lobbyist, and his lawyer also says that he deals with real estate and none of these are ill-gotten gains. But there is clear evidence that the enforcement directorate has mounted in its charge sheet, which will make it difficult for Sukash Chandrashekhar to get away. But the fact that he operated out of jail means that he was in collusion with a lot of jail officials, and the fact that he has not been prosecuted by any court for the last 20 years as he conducted all these operations indicates that the criminal justice system needs a total revamp to ensure that crooks like Sukash Chandrashekhar, modern Natwarlals, don't get away with the crimes they commit. Meanwhile, for more details of Sukash Chandrashekhar and the crimes he's committed, do look at the issue of India Today that has him on the cover as the king of con. It has exclusive details that goes way, way beyond others in terms of the kind of chronological order that it puts in and how Sukash went about doing his business. Thank you for listening to this episode of Nothing But the Truth. Look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing But the Truth.